Welcome back to Trail and Ultra Running Training. Whole goal of this podcast is to help you train a little better so that we can have more fun out on the trails. My name is Will France. I'm a running coach and a strength coach. And today I want to talk about power and plyometrics, more or less in the gym, but kind of anywhere because we can integrate some of these movements into our running training as well, be it warm-ups or in the middle, or they've been used a bunch of different ways. If you appreciate this information, I would appreciate it if you would share or subscribe or whatever. I think if you do the subscription thing, that is the most valued at the moment, or follow, or whatever it is that tells them you want to hear from me on a repeated basis, depending on the platform. But whatever you do to spread this information, if you appreciate it, I would love that. Anyway, let's talk about some strength stuff. Sorry if my voice feels a little weird. I was sick over the weekend. Wasn't too bad. I think it was a like mild food poisoning thing. Short-lived, but if you know anything about food poisoning, my vocal cords aren't feeling great. Anyway, so let's talk about strength stuff, power, plyometrics, etc. Fair warning, this is something I'm actively learning. I mean, I'm actively learning all this stuff. I spend a lot of time and money on continuing education because I like to get better at my job. But recently, I've taken a deeper dive into plyometric work because I realized that it was kind of a gap in my knowledge. There's some people that I really respect on the internet, and I'm taking a course and learning some things. And before we get into it, we should probably define a couple of different things about plyometrics because it means two not different things. One is just like encompassed in the other, kind of like a square and a rectangle, right? Like square is a rectangle, rectangle is not a square, if you remember that from math. Um, Same thing with plyos. Originally, they were kind of developed. I'm sure we've been technically doing them forever, but they were really developed as a training mechanism in the USSR in the 80s by a guy named Yuri Verkhoshansky. And he meant a very specific thing by them. Now, as time has moved on, especially in the US, we have started to refer to this more as any jumping thing. And I actually just heard a podcast with a pretty far reach where someone on there qualified it as any movement that creates force quickly. And I'm not here to really police terms. I think that language evolves. I think it means different things in different communities. And if we are now at a place where plyometrics means jumping things, then that's absolutely okay. But we probably need to be a little more specific about what we're training because there's a very wide breadth within jumping things. I will disagree with the creating force quickly. That feels a little much to me at the moment. If I pick up a deadlift very fast, is that a plyometric? Because I'm creating force quickly? I don't think so. I think it's a speed work on strength work. So there's a line there though, and I don't know. It's very fine for someone to disagree with me. Point is, there is a wide breadth of things where we create a lot of force very quickly. Now, this is why I think that to some degree, strength, like pure strength work, getting strong, being able to control your body, developing some muscle mass, is a precursor to power and plyometrics. Because if you don't have control over your body, if you don't have strength, then when we try to create power or force or do anything reactive, then we're just going to end up injured. Because if we can't control force slowly, then we probably shouldn't be trying to control it quickly, right? If we can't do a body weight squat well, then doing a squat jump doesn't make a ton of sense because it's a bigger range of motion with a lot more force, and then you have to have landing mechanics added to that. It seems silly. So I do not include plyometrics immediately out the gate for everybody. Also, although I am going to start including them earlier and integrating them more. I had more of a like plyometric tune-up phase. And if you've seen any of my old like strength progressions, that was more what that was. It was a lot of plyometrics geared more towards race time to try and like create that pop near towards race. And I think if we integrate a little earlier, it'll be a little more effective. As I said, learning things all the time and constantly trying to make some progress. It's not that it didn't work. I just think we can do it better. Now, for plyometrics, if we're going to use this term as jumping, that's okay, but we need to delineate a little bit. So the original version of plyometrics, created by Verkhoshansky in the 80s, he actually referred to it as shock training, and whatever that is in Russian. And it was defined by a very short ground contact time. And I know this is boring, but if you don't understand what this is, then we're going to do our plyos wrong. And I see people do plyos wrong all the time. So like take 20 seconds to learn this so that we can figure it out. So very short ground contact time. When we're doing these like reactive plyometrics, we should think the floor is lava. And if we are standing too long on the floor, then your feet are going to burn off. I realize if you're anywhere near lava, the floor, feet are going to burn off, but you get the point. So think of something like a pogo stick, right? Like it's very bouncy, and this is kind of the bounciness that we're trying to create in plyometrics. And they have a lot of crossover to running, because if you watch the Olympic marathons, wild, by the way, so cool. But if you watched them for 2+ hours, these people, men and women, were just kind of springing along the ground, step after step after step after step. And this is what we're really trying to do is running. This is why plyometrics have such a big carryover to running, because when we run well, we are doing a low level plyometric movement with every step. There's some spring to it, there's some reactivity, and this is why we see well integrated plyometrics make so much progress in things like running economy. And I know that is not our biggest metric as trail runners, but it still matters for us to run well. We're not just trying to like slog up and down the hills. We are still trying to move somewhat quickly and efficiently. So if we can make this force transfer better, great. So this is why I try to distinguish between power and plyometric, because power production would be the force production, power creation, force creation, right? The other is a transfer of force, and these are different. For one, we're trying to use our strength to create force. And the other, we're trying to transfer force as efficiently and effectively as possible. And this is, again, exactly what we're doing on running. And it's a slightly different adaptation. And if we are going to cross over some of this plyometric work, we need to really focus on keeping our ground contact time short and creating this efficiency, right? This has also been shown to reduce injury risk. So we probably have a little more distinction between power moves and plyometrics if we're going to do them well, because they work on different systems and they work to train different tissues of the body. Power and force production is going to be a lot more muscular, whereas plyometric is going to be a lot more like fascial and tendon and these connective tissues, right? Now, a jumping movement that focuses on power that most people know would be a box jump. Stand in front of a box, jump onto the box, step off the box. That is going to be a like power production movement. Now, we can also do a piece of jump training that would be more force absorption, right? This would be something like an altitude drop. Stand on a box, step off the box, absorb the force smoothly from the fall without making your knees pop out and explode out of your legs. And finally, there's like a plyometric version where we would combine these together. And it would be a depth jump or drop jump where you step off a box, really quick off the floor is lava, and then pop up either onto another box or into the air. And the drop jump is the one where you go to the box, and depth jump is where you go into the air. And these are pretty high level plyometric movements that focus on maximum force transfer. And if you're a very like fascially driven, tendon driven, springy kind of athlete, then a lot of the time your drop jump is going to be significantly higher than your regular box jump, right? Like if I stand in front of a box and jump, I might get 24 inches. If someone who's a more springy athlete than me but had a similar box jump, they might step off of a 12-inch box, react off the ground, and end up with like a 36-inch jump. Like there can be a very significant increase from this like shock reactivity cycle. And there's a lot of benefit that we can get to it, right? So if we can train this, we can all get a little better at this, whether or not we are naturally driven that way or not. Now, there's a whole range of intensity when it comes to plyos. There are these depth jumps, drop jumps. They're going to be super stressful. They're going to be a lot of engagement. And then there's also these like low-level plyos, and these might be pogos or like two-legged leaps. And really just trying to be quick off the ground, and it's not going to come very high. It's just going to be really speedy. No matter what, like when we were looking at pogos, when you hop 2 inches high, they are much less intense than pogos where you jump 12 inches high because the impact force is less because you're falling from less of a height. Not rocket science. One's not better than the other. They're both valuable at different times of the season for different purposes. And we need to pair them with load when it comes to things like running and strength training and whatever. Probably don't want to do your biggest intensity block at the same time as your biggest distance block while also maxing out your deadlift and doing 12-inch like single leg hops on a weekly basis. Your Achilles will probably snap. So we need to pair all these things together in a way that is not going to break you. And we'll talk about that more next week or something. Now, we also want to make sure that we get some one-legged work in. This can be in the form of bounds, and this is a really traditional thing for runners, where you're running, switching back and forth between legs, you jump off like left leg, jump off right leg, but with the focus of, again, really trying to create that short ground contact time. We're not trying to jump and stick the landing, we're trying to jump and be quick off the ground and use that springy nature of our foot. We look at our the entire back of our foot and bottom of our foot and back of our leg, it can function like a leaf spring. Go look at like an F-350 truck. There'll be these big leaf springs on the bottom that have like they're big bow functionally. And then when you put weight in the truck bed, they flatten out. And then when you take weight out of the truck bed, they become less flat. They get more bowed again. This is how the bottom of our foot and the back of our leg can function if we run, if we teach it to work along this like fascial way, right? So we look at bounds. It's going to be back and forth, leg to leg. We're not trying to hop side to side. We're still trying to keep that straight line. One of the biggest mistakes I tend to see is this like side to side movement, which is why it even came to mind. And then finally, hops are just going to be this like single leg over and over again. So instead of left, right, be like left, 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 left. And hops are really difficult and can take a while to get, but they're incredibly effective as a form of like power production and transfer. And all of these things we can do on any level. We can make them about 2 inches high, make them a foot high, whatever works for you and whatever fits your season. Now, a couple of vague rules that I don't always follow, but are good guidance and things to think about. These movements are intense and should be appreciated as such. And they shouldn't feel destructive. And the sets should be short and you should rest between sets, right? So this is a good idea for a lot of strength training. I think when it comes to plyos, it feels so similar to the running that we do that we often forget this. But it is more of a strength movement and we should appreciate it as such or else probably get hurt or lose the ability to create power and then it becomes a waste of our time. Another one, two, for power movements like box jumps, I don't see a lot of purpose in doing more than 5 in a single set unless you want to compete in something like CrossFit. CrossFit does massive sets of box jumps, and that is part of the sport. If you like that sport, great. If that's not the sport you're trying to do, then we should probably stick to about 5, maybe 8, but probably 5 or fewer, because it'll actually allow us to create the power production we're trying to get out of the box jump. Right? I've changed my opinion on this over the years. I've gone back and forth. I used to program more, and I've just gotten lower and lower and seen more progress out of it. So it is an experimentation thing. I don't think we have a perfect answer, but I really cap it at 5 now. For some force absorption stuff, especially early on, if we're just trying to train the body, and again, it's more lower level, that might be a little higher, but not really going above 10, usually going to 5. Now, if we're actually trying to create power, like stand in front of a box, jump high, take a short pause, keep reps low, and take a minute in between rests or sets. And if you don't need to rest, then you probably need to work harder. Jump on a higher box. Now, 3, for smaller plyos, we can measure them in contacts, like the amount of time your feet hit the ground, or distance. I don't think one is better than the other, but I tend to keep track of them in terms of contacts, like how many times my feet will hit the ground. And I'll usually stick somewhere between like 6 and 12, depending on the intensity. If we're going these big jumps, might be more in the 6 to 8 range. If it's going to be somewhere shorter and poppier, then it might be more like 10 to 12. Now, if we are, no matter what though, and this is a key thing with a lot of these like reactive movements, these reactive plyos, the point is to stay poppy and reactive. The point is to keep the ground contact time short. If this reactivity turns back into power production and becomes a slog, if your jumps go from sproing, then you were probably done 3 jumps ago because we're missing the point, right? So we have to have this intention for what our training is and then follow it and be willing to pull back when we need to. Now, some good ways to start with jumping in plyos. Start with box jumps and altitude drops. It's one of the reasons I already mentioned them, that we can learn to produce force of our own body weight and absorb force of our own body weight. And you could do like 3 sets of 5 box jumps at the beginning of one strength day and 3 sets of 5 altitude drops at the beginning of another strength day. It'd be a great way to like start these jumping movements. And you can do this like I would insert them at the beginning because they are a power production movement. They are technically a little dangerous compared to some other things in the gym because if you don't create enough power, you fall, and that sucks. So make sure that we're like feeling pretty fresh. So you do your warm up, do whatever you need to do to make sure that you feel good enough to move well, and then create some force, right? Now, these could be done on a like strength day. You can do them before a run, but I prefer that kind of work on a strength day. Now, in terms of lower level plyos, we can do these like short 2-footed leaps. Like they're often called pogos if you search them on the internet. And we could do some uphill bounds to get this single leg movement. And I like them uphill because they reinforce good form and it takes some load off because we're not like putting as much load through the tissues as if we were landing on flat ground. So lower level plyos, like that could be done on a strength day as well, or it could be done on a run. And I'm experimenting with them on both, and I like them as both. In fact, I kind of like them right before a run because it functions pretty well as a warm up. It trains like primes my tissues to be a little more poppy on that run. And finally, there's this whole middle ground here of power and reactivity. And this is why I think the term got vague over the years. It's not that I think it was intentionally bastardized. I think it was just not a like good way to represent the wide range of movements we can do here, and they all have some value. So instead of these like strict reactive plyos or big power production, we can also do like alternating split jumps, which are a little too deep and a little too long in the ground contact time to be a full power movement, but they're also not enough rest between reps to be to be a plyometric, but they're not enough rest between reps to be a power movement, right? They sit in the middle. Same with speed skaters or like side to side deep bounds. They're not really plyos in terms of their traditional like shock training sense, but they aren't really power either. They're in the middle and they have a bunch of value. And I think they also really shine in a warm up or shine like inserted into a strength day to create a bit of a gap and like switch your direction a little bit. And they have a ton of carryover to running, be especially trail runners, because we put ourselves into like weird positions all the time. Like I fell the other day on a trail and my heel was at my butt. Like it's not like we're always trying to react to positions that we'd like to be in. We're sometimes trying to react to positions that we don't want to be in. And we should feel strong in those positions and be able to transfer that force when we need to, even if it's not ideal. So they're worth incorporating in your training and worth playing with a little bit. Now, for power and plyos, just a quick recap. Plyometrics has come to mean any kind of jumping movement. I've heard it mean any fast production of force. I think that's probably a little far because I don't think a deadlift is really ever going to be a plyometric in my eyes, but that's up to the user, whatever. We have two like kind of ends of the spectrum here. Power production would be like a box jump where we're just creating a single load of force. And then like a more traditional plyometric would be transferring force, like really quick pogo hops. And everything in between. And they all have a lot of carryover to running. They can be very intense, but there's a wide range of intensity. 2-inch pogo hops are going to be very different than a foot pogo hop, right? So make sure that we scale that intensity compared to the rest of your training and running volume, and make sure that we have control and strength before we start to use these things. Because when you do something like a box jump, you are creating a ton of force. So if we can't do a body weight squat, probably shouldn't be doing a box or a squat jump, right? And once we start to create that power and create that force absorption, they do become a staple of any runner's routine because it has so much applicability. Now, I plan to do one more of these strength essentials things. It is going to be on the lines of like how to build a program. I want to warn you in advance that it is not going to be explicit because I don't know you. I don't know what you need. I don't know what exact strength work you need, right? But it's going to be a general thing of how to think about it and give you a starting guide as to how to create some plans. I would bet if you've listened to all of these, you will come out of it being able to create a pretty good strength program for you, depending on your time in the season. But you'll probably need to have listened to the other now 7 of these in order for number 8 to make any real sense. Now, I hope this was helpful. Hope you have a great day. Go get strong, train hard, have fun, and hope you have a great next run. See ya.